Hey, thank you for tuning in to another episode of InRange. This is going to be another digital security one, so if that's not your bag, tune out now and check out the next video, which is most assuredly probably history or gun related. So recently, the Senate voted on blocking an FCC regulation that would have prevented ISPs, internet service providers, from being able to sell your browsing data. So the FCC passed a series of regulations that were supposed to go into effect on March 2nd, which would have prevented your internet service provider from being able to sell your data to other third parties, advertisers, etc. So let's keep this in context. When you're on the internet, you have a provider between you and the content you're trying to get to. That's your internet service provider, typically Comcast, Time Warner, something like that. All of your data goes through them to get to the internet, as they are an edge provider on the internet. That means that all of your data, your DNS queries, everything you go to, every URL you visit, every website you watch, every video you watch, goes through them, and they log all of that activity. Now, it's up to them whether or not they're going to retain those logs. The ISPs each individually have their own policies and behaviors in that regard, but rest assured, most of them do, if not all of them do. Now, part of the reason to retain those logs is to have troubleshooting information, or in some instances, they may get a legal request to actually provide some of that data to track someone that's doing something truly malicious or nefarious. And that there are legal procedures for that. They'll actually get essentially a warrant, not like a wiretapping, but they'll get a warrant that allows them or asks for them to provide a certain amount of data provided through a certain amount of time based on specific IP addresses, or if possible, even specific usernames and etc. Well, that's different than what this is about. So keep in mind all of that data is logged, every website you go to, everything. And think of the kind of metadata that can be created from your online activity. If you go to visit full30.com and watch videos, or you go to YouTube and watch videos or watch specific channels, or you go to Midway USA and buy some products, or you go to Amazon.com and buy some products. Those URLs, those strings of text that are the website you're going to, even on URL, even on Amazon, for example, they tend to be specific, like Amazon.com/garbage/ widget I'm looking to buy. Well, that provides a lot of insight into you as an individual. They can determine that you're a gun owner, or likely a gun owner, that you bought specific calibers, or you bought specific bullets, or you went to Amazon and bought specific, I don't know, adult entertainment toys, whatever. And from that metadata, they can derive maybe that you are probably Republican, or maybe you went to Republican-oriented websites, or probably Democrat, or probably Libertarian, or most assuredly one of those three or something else. They can determine your sexual orientation. They can probably determine if you're married. They can determine if you own guns, what you do with your guns, what cartridges you typically use in your guns. Determine what type of operating system you're using. You're on an Apple, you're on an iOS device, you're on an Android device, you're on a Windows device. All that stuff, all of it, is contained in that data that you're always providing to the ISP as you're visiting websites. Now, keep in mind, even the websites you're visiting can derive some of that data from you already based on cookies and other stuff, but that's another conversation. So just keep in mind, your internet service provider has all of these logs, and they hold on to them for an indeterminate amount of time. Well, previous to the FCC regulation that was going to go into effect on March 2nd, they could have sold that data already. There was nothing restricting them from doing as such. And maybe they have, maybe they haven't. The reality is we don't know for sure. But the FCC decided to take a proactive approach and put in some regulations that were, again, going into effect on March 2nd that would have actually specifically prohibited them from doing that. Well, the Congress put a stay on that until they could have a vote. The Senate recently voted 50 versus 48 directly across party lines. Republicans decided to nullify the FCC regulations. The Democrats wanted to maintain the FCC regulations. And so, in effect, the Senate voted to allow ISPs to continue to retain your data and or sell it to third parties. This vote now goes to the House. The House is expected to maintain the party line, and they will probably also vote to nullify the FCC regulations. So what does this mean to you? Well, it really means that nothing's changed. It's the status quo. Previous to the FCC regulations, the ISP could have been selling your data already. And since these FCC regulations are likely to get nullified, they probably can continue to do that same thing, whether or not they have before or not. The chances are that they are not probably actively going to do that. Now, maybe some small ISPs have done something like that. I don't know. There's too many ISPs to really verify such a thing. But the reality is that if Time Warner or Comcast got caught selling your data, your online transactions, to a third party for advertising or other purposes, the market effect on them would be extremely severe. Now, one thing to keep in mind is that many of these ISPs essentially have a monopoly over certain regions. If you live in a tract home development, you may have Comcast and no other options, or your options are limited. You get to have high speed or crap based on your options. So that's a problem. But the reality is that if they were to be caught doing that, there would probably be significant market ramifications for that. So should you panic right now? No. Do I agree that the FCC regulations should have been maintained and that they should be prevented from proactively selling your browsing data? I agree with that regulation. And if you believe and agree with that as well, I would urge you to look at the EFF, the Electronic Frontier Foundation. They are the front line of defending our digital rights online. Write to your House representative, tell them you want to vote against repealing the FCC regulations, although that's probably a long shot. More importantly, what you can do is just be aware of the reality that everything you do on the internet is logged, that data is stored somewhere, and that right now they can sell it to third parties. If you want to do something about it, think about joining the EFF, write to your representative. Hopefully you guys like this kind of digital security stuff. I'm planning on doing some more of it in the future, some primers and how-tos on things that you can do to help protect yourself online. Let me know in the comments if you want to see more of that. I realize that this is a broad scope channel with InRangeTV, and this is a niche element of our data and conversation, but it's probably one of the more important ones. Thanks for watching.